I'm laughing at how to start this episode, to be quite honest, because um for all of our listeners, welcome to our No Name podcast. So we still are plugging along with no name and no script and just flying by the seat of our emotions today. So I laugh at this because we were talking about like what is our next topic, and we always come up with our topics on the things that we're going through kind of in the moment and how things have been. And so Diamond asked me, she's like how are you energetically? And I'm like, well, my energy's been like all over the freaking place all day today. It has, because it's just been one of those days. And so in one of our episodes we were talking about an abundance word, and we were joking because I logically came up with the word instantly. Diamond has this feeling, and if you're into human design, then you know that there are different like channels and things like that that either are open or closed. And this emotional thing for Diamond and I are, one's closed and one's open. So you can guess which one it is by the episode. So we're just going to leave that hanging there for, those of us that are in Gen X. Probably none of us have one of them open. But I joke about that.
Or
I know,
your conditioning makes you think that it's not.
I know, that's so funny because they probably are half and half. But I find it so funny because we sit here and we'll be talking about something and it's like, oh, this is in your chart. Oh, that's in your chart. And some of them are opposite, some of them are the same. And because we're both Cancers, we're both 5/1s, we both have major 7s in our soul contracts. We both have some 9s in there too. Like we have all of like our birthdays like literally like a week apart, but we're like decades apart by age. But it's one of those things, it's so funny. Like we'll talk and we're like, oh, you have that. No, I don't, And so now I kind of forgot what the topic of the discussion was. Like, oh,
Abundance words.
huh?
Oh yeah, abundance words. I thought that was
Abundance words, the logic part of it and the emotional part of it. So we're going to talk both of those things today. So I'm going to let the non-logical aspect of this speak now. Yes. I didn't want to say you're not the logical one because we're both very logical.
No, we are. And it's funny
We're
because
5/1s.
no, it's immediate. Like it's funny that you were like the non-logical and like immediately like my heart center, my like part of me that has, because the not self question that comes out of the ego heart center is, do I think I have something to prove? Like I immediately wanted to be like, I'm logical, I know things. And like
And I want to say I'm emotional, not. Yeah.
right. And then like just resting in the fact that literally don't do that because you're just proving to your brain that it can continue to use
Right.
logic to stop you. Like
Absolutely.
one of the things that we were talking about was this theory of abundance words. And I don't even remember which episode it is, so I'm never gonna try and reference it. Listen to all the episodes. And one of the things that came up was like, what is your abundance word? And the person who the example I used, her word was peace. And so having a word or a feeling, because I'm about to talk about the feeling part, having a word or a feeling that you have that you can check in with to see whether someone, because people can change this energy, or something like in like your everyday work tasks, like whatever it is it enhancing what you are doing, or is it like hindering it? Is it holding you back in some way from achieving whatever this word is? And I, for my birthday, I did mushrooms on my birthday. And it wasn't like crazy. I didn't do like a hero dose. It was only like 0.9. It was less than a gram, but almost a gram of mushrooms. And so it got me into this place where my default mode network was reduced. It was, taking a back seat. I was more open. I was able to connect with my higher self. And one of the like assignments, because you should always set intentions before you deal with any sort of plant medicine. You don't just go in there all willy-nilly and be like, well, just see what happens. Like, no.
No.
Don't do that. Don't. But so one of the intentions that I had set was like, okay, what is my abundance word? And one of the things that came from that experience was really just being in my body and connecting to spirit and just really feeling the joy that came with it. Like there are joyous, euphoric moments for sure, but really, and I guess this is the part of me that doesn't like to copy people, but like there was peace as well. But I was like, I don't want that to be the word necessarily. And so I know what it felt like though. And so I was like coming out of the experience state and returning back to, us as we are without plant medicine. I was going to be hard on myself because I didn't come up with a word. Like I set an intention, I went in and I didn't do the thing that I went in to do necessarily. And then I was like, no, because like, what you felt. And you like in human design, we have a strongest sense. I think this comes from your variables, if I'm not mistaken, which are those like little arrows that are like at the top of your chart. And one of my strongest, not one of the strongest sense in my chart, not only do I have emotional authority, but my strongest sense is feeling. And so for me to, especially knowing that I have an open ajna, and the not self question that comes out of that is, am I trying to convince everyone that I'm certain? Like knowing that I struggle with this, like, I have to be in the logical and I have to have this thing. Like language is a very logic driven, like the mind came up with it to be able to communicate, which is why you learn other languages. And so it's one of those things where I was going to beat myself up for actually doing the thing that I'm like supposed to do. Like if logic is not what I'm here to, like I'm supposed to play in the possibility.
Right.
I came out with a feeling. As long as I can check in with that feeling, like, and even if you listen to like Rhonda Byrne's work or anyone who talks about law of attraction, really, I just use her as an example because like she wrote the book The Secret. But if you listen to anyone, they say that yes, think about what you want, think about the reasons why you want it, but also feel the feeling of the wish fulfilled, because feelings are that strong. And so for me, like I came out with technically, like it wasn't technically what I was supposed to, like I didn't have a logic driven word that I can think about and test, but I can say like if I'm around someone and they don't make me feel the way I felt when I was on vacation, like you are challenging whatever this
Okay.
is. I mean, I have a word for it, but you are challenging this and I don't like it.
Yeah.
You have to go or you have to do something different in order to be in this space.
Yeah.
So yeah, from the logic person.
So yeah, and oh Lord, where do I want to start with this? That's always the fun part of this because yes, I'm very much driven by logic and through training, through just even my soul contract is very logical in a lot of spaces. And I'm sure my human design is to some extent, probably a lot. Um, and but for my destiny that I have, my soul's destiny, there has to be a lot of logic involved with it. Because it's very like transmuting things that you're learning and teaching other people how to do that as well. And so there has to be some some theories behind that, and then also some practicalities and some steps to do, I guess you could say. So, but when you said that, like literally the first word that flew into my brain was flow. And but I also have, when I talked, I don't know what episode it is, but I know there was an episode where I talked about it like a dial on an oven, and that's kind of your emotional. And for me, like I know on that dial where abundance is for me because I've had that feeling when I was in flow of what that felt like, what that was. And so when I get to that, I know like there will be a lot of abundance. Um, and it could be financial abundance, it could be emotional, it could be whatever, you know, the intention is for it. But sometimes when I'm not on that frequency, it's hard to get to it. Like it seems like the logic will play, like you're saying, like the words will play mind games with you to say, okay, well, you know, let's say on the scale, you know, abundance is 7 and I'm at a 5. To get to that 7, my brain will out logic itself to get there, or it will out logic itself to say, okay, this is the things I need to do in my business. And that's not really the flow. And so even like when you asked me earlier about my energy with this, because today has been one heck of a testing day for me, like just, you know, and I think I said it somewhere in a podcast, but like I woke up this morning and went to wash my hands and there was a scorpion in my sink. Like that's how my day started, you know? And so now we've recorded several of these today. So I guess that story will be there twice, but oh well. But like when you have days that just start out like that and you're trying to get to a certain frequency because you know that's where you need to be, sometimes logic will take you out of that. Like there will be things that will keep coming. And it has been kind of like that for me today. And I am tired. Like I know energetically I am tired, but I still have like things to do and you know, a couple meetings even after recording this. And I'm kind of like, okay, how do I get myself there? Like, how do I get out of my logic? How do I get into that into that feeling? And for some of us, depending on what our human design is or our contracts are, for some of us, it's harder to get into those emotions. It's harder for us to get out of the logic. Hmm. I'm being told by somebody over here to just shut up. Like, because they're telling me to like sit back and listen. That's what I'm feeling from my guides right now. But it was, you know, it's one of those things like sometimes the brain just wants to circumvent everything you're doing. And so I'm going to be quiet now that they're telling me to be quiet.
No, I mean, I guess, no, I mean, maybe because they maybe felt, I don't know. I am looking forward to the point where I am in my like psychic journey enough that like guides are speaking to me. Because they say some really cool things sometimes that are very helpful.
Yes.
But but um you were saying like, you know, depending, it may be hard. And so like for you, I'll use you as an example. Maybe this was like meant to be, but you have sacral authority. So even when, if I'm not mistaken, you have definition, and I'd have to double check. I'm not going to double check in this moment because that's the one in me who's like trying to like prove and be certain in things. And I'm like, it's fine, it's easy going flow. But if I'm not mistaken, you have definition in your ajna for sure, and possibly your crown. So what happens with that is like there's very much this logical thinking. Like you sometimes become addicted to your own thinking. Like it's hard to like it's just blah 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 blah. And so when that happens, like it's hard not to listen to that and be able to tap into your body. But you have sacral authority. Like no matter how much definition you have, unless you're, I think unless you're a projector, like an environmental projector, which I'm not sure what the percentage is on like how many of those there are in the population. But unless you don't have any like splenic activations, like you're a sacral generator. And so when, especially for generators, we respond to things. And so if I were to ask you, are you wearing a black shirt?
Yes.
You like, like you would close, like, obviously I would have you like, and this is something that one of my mentors, she does. She
Mhm.
has me close my eyes because I get in here. She asks me a question. I'm like, I think. And she has me close my eyes and she asked me some very easy yes or no questions. Like she'd ask me like, are you wearing glasses? Uh-huh. And that's the other piece of it too, as because I was talking about language being very like logic
Right.
things. And so as we grew up, we were conditioned as children to like use our words
Right.
and not say but like naturally. And like if you study any type of like Sanskrit or things like that, like we have these sacral sounds.
Right.
And so if I were to ask you a question, like your sacral would be like or it'd be like mm-mm. Like if
Yeah.
I'd be like, did you want to kill that scorpion this morning?
Yes.
like, like you'd be like, and so your sacral tells you or what happens is that the mind almost immediately kicks in and it's like, but what about this and what about that and what about this and then this and that and that, and then you confuse what your natural sacral response
Right.
was. So even if you don't have a defined solar plexus, your body tells you
Oh yeah.
what is happening. You just have to be out of your mind enough to
Right.
like be able to listen to it. And even as somebody who has a defined solar, I'm like, what am I feeling? Like that was
Right.
really hard for me on vacation. Like she told me to slow it down. And she was
Right.
like, from the moment you get up, you're responding. Do I want to get out of bed? Do I want to make a cup of coffee? And I'm like, oh, you're so right. But we
Right.
do so many of these things on automatic just because our brain is just like
Right. And I always correlate, okay, so this is how my brain works. So many people who have similar human designs as me will have that, or if they have sevens and some sixes and eights and stuff in their chart.
yeah.
Uh, but talking about that mechanism, like, and I always tell my kids this, when you ask me a question, it's like, okay, so we have to back up a few years before you were born to cassette tapes. So if you
Wow.
used to have a cassette tape, or if you know what a cassette tape is, or you could even do this like on a video, like if you're watching a YouTube video, and let's say you've gotten to minute 34 on the YouTube video, but they reference something that's back at 2 minutes and you've forgotten what they said, and you back it up to that 2 minutes. That's what my brain does every second of every day when you stop me and ask me a question, because my brain is already thinking at minute 34 and you're back on 2. So I literally have to backtrack 30, probably 30,000 thoughts, to get back to the thought that you're asking about. And then when you ask me that question and it stops and I've given you an answer, then I like speed forward because I got to catch up to where I was. And I tell people that's the way I am constantly all day long. So I did this, and this is for moms to do this practical thing. So if you're like, people call that overthinking or you too much logic or whatever, but some of our brains just work that way. And some could be ADHD, ADD, those type of things could also play a factor into. I one day sat down and I kept a piece of paper beside my desk. And my kids were a little bit younger, and I was working at my desk, and I had picked a 2-hour time slot. And I said, every time someone interrupts me, I'm going to write something down. That meant it could be an email, it could be a text message, it could be my kids coming to the door, it could be a phone call, whatever it was. And I had a task that was going to take me about 2 hours. So I knew like I could do this task in about 2 hours if I wasn't interrupted. But how many times was I interrupted? And so when I got done, there was 67 tally marks within those 2 hours. And so the tally marks where it was actually like I had to respond to it immediately. I did those ticks a little bit, and they were like 40 of the 67 that I had to respond to. So I said for my brain, I had to do that the whole video back and forth 47 times. And I was like, that is how like when I'm completely in my head, that's how it works. But when I'm doing like my spiritual work, or I'm writing, or I'm in flow and I'm literally coming from my gut, like I can do that and 2 hours can pass by and there's usually no interruptions. It's amazing how spirit and your guides will make sure you don't have the interruptions if you don't need them. But it's, to me, that's so interesting when you're talking about human design, because many of us don't understand our designs, like how we are designed. And once I realized that that's how my brain worked, I have to do the certain things that are like logical. I have time blocks in my schedule for those logical pieces. And then when I need to be more in like a flow state, so like this crazy morning that I had designed the morning to be more flow statey. So even so, like I didn't do certain logical things prior to doing this because I wanted to be in that flow, because I knew I needed to be there. And that's what I want our listeners is, once you understand what makes you tick, and I don't care what tool it is, you can use Myers-Briggs, you can use human design. I prefer human design and soul contracts because they make the most sense to me. But you know, and they're more on a spiritual plane. You're taking it up a notch when you're wanting to learn about yourself, when you use these tools and modalities. But when you understand that, then you can find shortcuts, in my opinion, to doing that. And so being able to stay in that, my word of flow, abundant, that's how I've had to like navigate out of that logic phase. So I know the thing, I even have like a spreadsheet that's on my computer, and it literally says like office days and all the logical things that I have to do for my clients, for myself. It can, you know, whatever it is that it was going to take too much logic. If I have to create like an outline for something that's very logical, I do all of that in that same frame of mind. And then all the other stuff I try to put on different time blocks, because I do know that, like, I do know that about myself. When I'm in flow, it goes, you know, it is what it is. And I don't, like, when I'm with my clients, my logic is gone out the window. Like there is very little logic with it, because I'm going totally off my intuition and totally off my gut, you know, feeling. And so I appreciate you bringing that up, because I think sometimes we forget that we're designed uniquely for reasons. Like, just because I don't have this open or closed, whichever one it is better, you know, neither one of them's good or bad, you know, not, you know. And that's the funny thing, like Diamond and I, so much of our charts, and we're going to do a live reading one of these days as a podcast, so that you can see the modalities that we use on each other, like on each other will be the examples and guinea pigs. But how alike we are in a lot of things, but how unalike we are in a lot of things. And so it's so neat to me, going back to our roots of this podcast, that you were the unicorn that came up my head. Now your hair's all blue. It was all purple when I saw her in my mindset. And literally I went off my gut. Like I knew that this was not a logical, this podcast was not done on logic. None of we are not doing anything we're supposed to be doing with this podcast. Let me just tell you. And that is supposed to do. Yes, we're air quoting to those listening to us that we're supposed to, because we're literally going with flow. And for me, that's where my abundance word is. And so that's why I think I thought of it, because this podcast and working and co-creating with Diamond is literally non-logical for either one of us. And so that's a beautiful place to be. So I encourage those listeners on the journey, to just be who you are, you know, just be who you are.
Be
Because
who you
we
are.
we need you that way.
Yes, like you're right, your family, your mom or dad might say, you don't make sense. What are you talking about? Your friends might be like, what are you talking about? Society, of course, will be like, you're not doing the marketing things. You don't have a name. You don't have a right. You don't know what you're gonna talk about. You just kind of meet, like, all of the things that you would should yourself into doing that quite honestly would hold you back. Because if we waited until we had a name for this podcast to start having conversations, who knows? Right? Who knows? So it's one of those things of like, just be who you are authentically. We have been conditioned to believe that we have to fit into this status quo. And that's simply not true. Like, just we are all unique individual beings. And even as Rachel just said, like, there's so much in our chart that is similar, but there is also so much in our charts that are different. And it's one of those beautiful places where we can appreciate what the other has that we don't. And we've gotten into this place as a society where if someone's different than we are, then we make them wrong for that. And it's like, no, we were designed to be a certain way. That's not wrong or right, or, and yes, air quoting, wrong, right? But
Right.
like, it just is.
Right.
Like, it's just who you are.
Right. In soul contracts, we always talk about like the soul chose the journey that they're on. Like our outer appearance, our physical appearance, this is like literally, we just chose this like avatar to live in. Like our soul's existence is in this body. And so, yes, there are going to be things like we get conditioned to do just because the human experience is designed that way, but the soul is saying, wait a second, I need you to experience these things. And sometimes the things are not always pretty, but the experience is the experience. Or we may meet somebody, like me meeting Diamond, like we're very much alike in some things, but we're completely opposite in others. And that yin and yang part of that aspect of the soul is what is needed in discussion and different perspectives in different spaces in our lives, because we're going to be able to uniquely go, hey, we're both experience, like, our topics oftentimes come from just random things that are happening day to day in our business, but it sometimes coincides that we're going through similar things at the same time, just in different ways. But it doesn't make the experience that our soul chose us to journey on any less valid, because we're just doing it in our own timeline. And we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother topic for another time. But we're experiencing this, and I think sometimes we invalidate the human experience because, oh, it's not like so and so's, oh, our trauma is not as big as like that is bullshit. I'm just gonna throw that out there. My trauma is my own. It ain't for you to judge. It's not for you to take on. It's not for me to even say it's better or worse than anybody else's. It's just mine. That's my journey. That's what my soul wanted. And to this like comparison thing that's going on right now, like drives me crazy in the spiritual community. What's worse? What trauma is worse than the other? And they're none. All of it's the same in my book. We're all on the as our own journeys of dealing with some of these things, but then we're also on the same journey of having some very beautiful experiences in life. Like to me, like this podcast, this is a beautiful experience. Yes, do we talk about heavy shit? We do, but the experience of having the dialogue is the beautiful part of it, even though we have to bring up some not so beautiful things at times. And so looking at life that way and knowing that we're uniquely designed in our human form as well as in our soul form to do what we're supposed to do while we're here. And if we're doing that, in my opinion, we're in flow. And so that's where I was going to bring it back to my word. my logical 3D-ish word.
Yeah.
So awesome.
Yeah. And for me, it's been a feeling, right? When Rachel asked me about being a co-host on this podcast randomly, because we hadn't talked in like months, there was just something that was like, intriguing. Your higher self told you to reach out to me. My higher self is saying, yes, let's talk about it. Like, it was just like a feeling.
And imagine if we had more conversations like that. Like if we had, like I know some people that are listening and go, that sounds so weird, like you're talking like in a third person aspect. But you are, when you're in this space and you're starting to do certain things with your purpose. Like if I would have reached out and said, hey, Diamond, I have this really crazy idea of us doing this podcast together, she'd probably not even responded. But I was like, no, it wasn't me. It was my higher self told me to tell her that this is it. Like, that's who I thought of. And if she didn't get on board with it, then I was going to question higher self. the next time I spoke with her. But, it was one of those things like in my gut, didn't have any question about it. Like, I knew you were going to say yes. I like, there was no other option. Like, source told me that it was done. Like, it was literally, to me, it was one of those things like, okay, it's a done deal. So for me, I think that's why, like, not having a name, I don't even know what episode we're on at this point. We're completely joking. We'll probably joke till the end of this podcast, the last episode we ever do, many, many years.
Season one will have a name by the end of season.
Yes, we'll hopefully we're gonna put that out there, that intention. We're gonna have a name by the end of season 1. But it's one of those things, like, we joke about it, but I don't really care if we have a name or not. Like, that's how determined I was, that when Source said, this is the person, and I saw her purple hair and her purple aura, I knew exactly who it was. Now it's blue aura and blue hair, but I knew exactly who it was. And I was like, okay, it's a done deal. And all the other stuff didn't really like matter at that point, because to me, that's flow. And as long as I know I'm staying in that, I'm good with it. Once I start to get out of that, that's when I have to ask higher self, what's getting me out of alignment here? And I think that's going back to what you're talking about with human design, that, some of us are open, some of us are closed, but we've got to learn how to navigate in who we are and how we do that. And that's what I want to encourage our listeners, because you may not have a word, you may have a feeling for abundance, but I want you in the comments to share, if you do have a word or feeling, share with us what that is, because we're always curious to know what our listeners have to say about that, and what you guys are thinking, or if there are things that we have talked about that you're curious to learn more about, or things about us that you're curious to learn more about. Let us know in the comments, or email us and let us know, because we definitely will talk about a lot of things in the future. Don't know what those things are always, but whatever they may be, we'll talk about them in the future. And, we want to talk about how we can help you as individuals on your journey through this, because that is the whole point, is for us to be able to share with you the modalities that we love, but also be able to share other things and tools that we've used along the way to help us with that. So if you don't have a word for abundance, have a feeling. You can either be the logical one or the emotional one. So you figure out which one you are, because there's one of each one of us here. So
yeah.
Exactly. So anything else you want to share with the audience?
I don't think so. I am complete.
I am too. Like, I'm gonna be honest with the audience. We've done a couple recordings today, and I feel good. I don't feel like I woke up this morning with a scorpion in my sink. Or my computer shut down, or I didn't get my hair done today. Like, as y'all can see, like, if you're watching the audio or the video, I don't have my hair done today, so it got thrown up in the bun. And I was like, oh well, it's fun. This is how it's gonna go. So yes, I feel complete too. So to our audience, make sure you like, subscribe, listen to us, share this podcast with whomever you love, and who need some abundance in their life, either logically or through feelings. So we love you all, and we're here for you on your journey. So reach out to us if you would like to connect with us. We love you all, and we bid you adieu.
Adieu.